West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Yeah, Republicans have made pretty clear over the last couple of weeks who they are and who they're loyal to. Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill of New Jersey. She's a United States Navy veteran and a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Congresswoman Sherrill, it's good to see you today. You said yesterday you got up speaking on behalf of H.R. 3233 to create this January 6th commission. Talked about the importance of it in healing the country. Why do you think this is an important step? And what do you say to the Republicans who voted against it?
Good morning, Willie. Yeah, this is something I have been fighting for since right after January 6th. Much of the legislation I've proposed is in the commission bill, which I was happy to see. From the start, I said it has to be bipartisan for this country to have faith in that commission, to see it as outside the political partisan games that sometimes occur here. And as we've seen some of the false narratives and the misinformation continuing to come out of Washington, out of the Republican Party, I think it's important that we have a bipartisan, independent commission to address this. Willie, as you know, I'm from North Jersey. A lot of people who were affected, some who died in 9/11. That commission, I think, was important to helping the nation understand the events of that day, what led up to them, how we could as a nation protect ourselves, and then how we can heal going forward. And I hope this January 6th commission can do the same.
Congresswoman, it's Jonathan Lemire, and certainly you've just stressed why this is important, why you believe this commission is needed. But I'd like to get your reaction to what we've seen the last day or so, where, yes, there were 30-odd members of the Republican Party in the House who voted for it. But with Senate Republican leader McConnell coming out against it, this faces a real uphill climb in the Senate to actually happen. So what's your take on that? And if the Senate says no to this, what happens next? Where should we go from here?
It was such a tough night last night, because here you have 35 brave people who would just tell you that they weren't brave. They were just really putting their oath to the Constitution first, putting the country first, who came out and said, of course, we need a bipartisan, independent commission to address the worst attack on our nation's capital in our history, an attack incited by the President of the United States against members of Congress as we were trying to certify the elections to protect our democracy. And yet it was also really troubling to me. We had 175 members vote against a bipartisan, independent commission negotiated by John Katko, who had been deputized by Kevin McCarthy, a back-and-forth negotiation. And we thought, many of us in Congress, that we had gotten to a place where we could all agree on it and, again, start to heal the nation. And, I've taken, as I've probably said on this program, numerous oaths to the Constitution as an officer in the Navy, as somebody at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and my last two oaths to Congress. But every single person in the House of Representatives has taken that same oath. And they owe it to this nation to look into the events of January 6th and make sure it never happens again.
So, Congresswoman, I wanted to ask you about the DCCC's post-mortem from the 2020 election, something obviously that I know you and other Democrats in swing districts have to be looking at closely. Their conclusions seemed to be that, first of all, there was bad polling, but to be fair, there was really bad polling on both sides. Republicans were expecting to get wiped out in the House even the weekend before the election. But also, I think rightly, a lot of focus was paid to the defund the police message, the socialism message that Democrats rolled their eyes at, but voters listened to. What are people like yourself who are in swing districts, competitive districts, doing to make sure that your voters know that you support the police, you support funding the police, you support free enterprise? Is there anything in place in the Democratic Party to make sure that people in swing districts are diffusing that message and letting voters know it doesn't line up with their own personal beliefs?
So certainly a lot of us in our own personal districts are working very hard to show through our legislative record the money that we're putting towards the police departments, how much we support our police. I think the vote last night was critical in our support of the police. We saw Capitol Hill police officers putting out a letter saying, please, this vote supports us and is important to us. And so I think that is something that many of us care about, making sure that our businesses know that we want our small businesses, our communities to thrive, ensuring again and again and again that we put money towards PPP loans, that we've done the Restaurants Act, the Save Our Stages Act that we've put into the American Rescue Plan, focusing on getting people back up on their feet, that's critical to us. I'm not a socialist. I don't think many people in the Democratic Party are, but that is something that I think we need to work through the work in Congress, through the work we're doing to get the country back up on its feet. That will be shown by our work. And I think something that I've always said is just let me run on jobs and the economy. I'm working so hard on all of the issues that people care about. I love the Equality Act. I care deeply about many of our social issues. But when we are in a pandemic, when we have seen some of the worst economic numbers over the past year as we've tried to combat that, we have got to get people safe, secure jobs. And I think what we're doing now is not just building those safe, secure jobs to get the country back to where we were, but as Biden would say, building the country back better, making sure people in the new economy feel more secure than ever.
Congresswoman, you have good relationships with many Republicans inside your caucus. You're not a harsh partisan. I'm curious what you make of the state of play in the building where you're standing right now, not just on this January 6th commission, but more broadly. When you talk to people privately, they say, yeah, we probably should have a January 6th commission, but I don't want to stick my neck out and be the one who votes for it and raise the ire of Donald Trump or raise the ire of his voters. I can't do that and also keep my job. What is it like trying, at least, to work with Republicans right now with the specter of Donald Trump looming over everything?
I guess that's in part why some of the news last night was quite good news to me, because some of the members that I really respect and I've gotten to know, and I know they're working hard for the country, were among those who voted for the commission. And it's easy to say, oh, well, of course they voted for a bipartisan independent commission. But the Republican Party is not known for running a loose ship, shall we say. And that was, I think, important for them to put this country first, and I was glad to see they did that. It continues to be tough when you hear that January 6th was a tourism event. I'm shocked by that narrative and this continued attempt to whitewash the events of that day for political purposes. I think if this nation is going to heal, if we're going to protect our democracy, if we're going to create a more resilient democracy, we have to address the events of that day, and that should be something that every single member of Congress wants to do.
It is Thursday, the 20th of May of 2021, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Well, I'm a bit peeved, and not only because I continue to be suspended by Facebook. I guess I'll be serving the whole 30-day sentence, even though an appeal has been made to the Oversight Board. I figure the Oversight Board won't get to this appeal until long after I've been reinstated and been suspended a few more times for other scurrilous charges, which have nothing to do with the reason for being suspended, like harassment, bullying, or sex. If anybody checked out my Twitter timeline, I posted a notice from Facebook from a GIF that I posted last June that is counted against me because I was suspended then for posting this GIF that they said was nudity and sexual violence. And what was the GIF, the little video loop that I posted? A meme, a GIF from Glee of a crying cheerleader alone in a car in a rainstorm. And Facebook suspended me for 30 days because that was reported as nudity and sexual violence. I had appealed, and they said, nope, it is what it is, and you're done for 30 days. And I was reminded by Facebook that that is one of the 6 posts from the last year that is used against me for my current suspension. I must say that the other 5 were just as ridiculous. I posted a small history of race riots in the United States only since Reconstruction. I didn't even go before we became a nation. And I was suspended for 30 days for that because that was reported as harassment. And Facebook agreed. And that is one that is counted against me for my current suspension for bullying and harassment. And as a reminder, what is that bullying and harassment? Having a takeoff on the old Jonathan Swift modest proposal in just a throwaway thread on the death penalty. I mean, I was just commenting on that I think it's wrong to kill people. I really do. And what I call one of the hippie Nazis on this particular thread, the Ashland Peeps thread, if you want to know, who is, I don't know, he sure sides with the Nazis a lot. There's a lot of them around here too, which is weird. Anyway, this is like another account that this fellow put up. I don't know how they get away with it. I thought that was a violation of terms of use, but they continue to do it. But anyway, because I said I just don't think it's wrong to kill people. And as I mentioned yesterday, the guy said, well, do you eat meat? Basically, I retorted that in a pinch for the common good, I suppose I could eat you. And then I followed up and said, but I probably wouldn't because, it's really stringy. Smells like goat because this particular Nazi hippie is a goat herder who has a herd of goats and he goes around. And I actually think it's a good idea, mow fields with goats rather than machinery. But still, I made mention that, probably smell like goat. And I was suspended for threats of violence, bullying, and harassment. Of course, did I report the godless commie, we're going to come after you, we're going to find you in town and beat the crap out of you, That's never a violation of terms of use. But if you tell them, which I was suspended previously for, one of these maggot Nazis thinks he's a big guy, and I don't know. I called him a Napoleon. He had a Napoleon complex. And he wants to beat me up in town. And I just retorted, okay. The okay was reported as bullying and harassment. I was suspended for 7 days, and then now I'm suspended for making a joke about, well, I don't know. If I have to eat meat, I guess I'd have to eat you. Yeah, like that's real. So anyway, happens right before the news of the Trump organization being criminally charged. It's very curious how these suspensions occur when big news drops occur. And all the people who are lying about the pandemic, and all the people who are lying about January 6th, and all the people who are lying about Joe Biden not being the president of the United States, it's really Donald Trump, continue to post. And people who post, like me, a gif of a crying cheerleader alone in a car in a rainstorm from Glee. And that is a suspension for nudity and sexual violence. We know exactly where Zuckerberg is going. Almost makes you think that Putin has something on his family. You know? I sometimes wondered about that. So why am I angry on top of being suspended from Facebook, which now, I mean, after spending over 6 months in suspension last year, over and over and over for the same BS. What makes me even more mad than that? Actually, the point I was going to make is that, I don't know, it's just like I expect to be suspended from Facebook at this point for any reason. You use the word the. You're out of here, you harasser. Indefinite articles are not allowed. Oh, my God. The reason I am extremely angry is that Hannah Jones was denied tenure at the University of North Carolina because she wrote the 1619 Project, and that means that she's the real racist. How dare you say that the beginning of this country started when the first slave ship hit the United States? Well, if you want to be actually more correct, it was even before that slave ship landed on the United States. Okay? Because they still had to travel how many months it took. But I bet there's classes right now that are teaching the Turner Diaries. So we'll deconstruct the Turner Diaries. But we cannot learn about the 1619 Project. Critical race theory. Makes white people scared and mad, and we have to listen to them. My God. So we're gonna let the bigots win. Is that what was going to happen? I think that there are more of us than there are of them, and maybe they need to be quarantined. We have the apparatus to do it. We just need the fortitude. I know I'm treading upon perilous ground here. Something has to be done. We have Nazi sympathizers, if not outright Nazis themselves, within our law enforcement, all the way into the Secret Service, cheering the insurrection on January 6th. Secret Service agents were doing that. They ought to not only be fired, I think that they need to be followed for a bit, if not actually quarantine themselves in an icebox. Baby gulag. Oh, no, if we go that route, we could fall into the trap of being a Pol Pot, a Ceausescu, any one of these idiots who decide to rule arbitrarily. But something has to be done. When you have Nazis within the Secret Service, you got Nazis in the FBI, you got Nazis on city councils, you have Nazis, and we're going to speak about this in terms of state GOP parties. Yeah, it's exactly what the Nazis did back in the day. They first went into localities and took over the party apparatus of whatever was prevailing or in that area and took it over. Wasn't hard. A lot of Burgermeisters wanted to, I don't know, not have to compete with the Jews. Yeah, I guess so. And here we are now. Hannah Jones denied tenure in the same way that Einstein was pretty much run out of Nazi Germany when Landis and Stark attacked his, and this is their term, Jewish science. The theory of general relativity is Jewish science. What did Landis and Stark then embark upon? Well, trying to wed physics with the master race. Oh yeah, Aryans. We can see them in the cosmos. They're part of our whole physics. It's all, I don't know. This is our general relativity. Yeah. The same kind of racism that ran Einstein out of Germany is what's being utilized right now against Hannah Jones and others. But I'm livid. UNC is going to get away with this? A MacArthur fellow? Are you serious? Do you think we're that stupid? You know, this is the problem. These people live in their little bubble of maggot idiocy. They think the whole rest of us are as idiotic as those that are able to fall into that morass. Two-party system. Leave it to the Democrats. We'll have almost a parliament. That's how fractured we are. But somehow we're able to all come together for the common good. Just don't say that on Facebook. You'll be suspended for harassment and bullying if you're trying to do something for the common good. What's on the rest of the menu here? On West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy's Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. Well, the bad faith negotiations of the GOP leadership will not derail the January 6th commission, even if it has to be a special counsel appointed by Merrick Garland. On the rest of the menu, a seller of vaccine disinformation had their YouTube channel removed, so he probably just went to Facebook. Facebook Live. Texas Governor Abbott signed a law banning abortions before women even know they are pregnant because he's thinking about the little ladies. And the heads of the Republican Party in Wyoming, Texas, and Michigan have called for their states to secede from the Union. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where the trial of former French President Sarkozy for illegal campaign funding has resumed after a COVID delay. And Belgian forces kept up their manhunt for an armed soldier who is on a terror watch list because of his extreme right sympathies. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is that chat room link, and that chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link is the link to our Patreon page. All the way to the left And that's near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, and if you could afford the cost of what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink, and if you could afford to send those funds our way once a month, we're able to stretch those dollars beyond compare. And then we pay our bills, we fly under the radar, and continue this resistance against the Nazi takeover of our representative democracy. That's right. Your generosity allows us to do so, and we've been doing it for 10 years. That's how long it sometimes takes, and it looks like it's going to take longer. The Nazis seem very emboldened. I don't know why. Well, that's being rhetorical. We all know why. So thank you for your generosity. We're going to continue this resistance as the founders originally intended, and it's because of your generosity. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. Go to @NetrootsRadio. Tom made it simple, and he takes care of it. Thanks, Tom. Follow me on Twitter @JusticePutnam, however complicated I might be. And most importantly, I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime and get that posted up on Twitter. So you can find those show notes and links diary by following me on Twitter, and that's where the real reportage is, not Twitter, the show notes and links. Follow the show on Twitter @Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, YouTube, iHeart, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. They're everywhere. Deezer. I even saw that Deezer were going to be on Deezer. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe, our snoozing sous chef is snoozing. On a little medical update, yes, as a reminder, he does have a scheduled surgery in June for a soft palate repair because English boxers apparently have soft palate problems. He does drop his food a lot, and the snoring is not good on his heart, and ostensibly it's supposed to help with that snoring and give him a healthier and a higher quality of life. So we are preparing for that. He's got to lose some weight, too. Okay. Well, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes out of the Associated Press by Michelle R. Smith. A major online seller of disinformation about COVID-19 and its vaccines has had one of its channels removed from YouTube days after an Associated Press investigation detailed how they work with other spreaders of false information to make money. The Truth About Vaccines YouTube channel was taken down this week. Ty and Charlene Bollinger said in a post on Tuesday on the messaging app Telegram. The Bollingers channel had about 75,000 subscribers, but some of his videos had a much broader reach, including one that had over 1.5 million views and featured Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a prominent voice in the anti-vaccine movement. A message that greets visitors to the channel says the account was terminated for violating YouTube's community guidelines. YouTube said it terminated the account because it violated its policies barring COVID-19 medical misinformation and had 3 strikes in a 90-day period. YouTube started banning anti-vaccine misinformation in October. You know, Facebook supposedly is not allowing COVID denial and misinformation, but surprisingly, it's all still up. And if you push back against any of their actors in any fashion, in any way, even if in opposition to the death penalty, you will be suspended. But the misinformation continues to be posted. It has a little notice saying, if you want the truth about COVID, go here to the CDC. They think the CDC is some sort of weird deep state baby harvesting entity where we eat the babies. Okay. Well, back to this article. Still, the Bollingers operate The Truth About Cancer, another YouTube channel with more than 166,000 subscribers. And anyone who goes to that channel and searches vaccines will find videos that sow distrust and fear about vaccines or push disinformation about COVID-19. At least one includes debunked falsehoods about the presidential election. While that continues, YouTube cannot be said to have taken effective action, said Imran Ahmed, CEO of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which monitors online disinformation. They've taken some action, but they need to act in a comprehensive way against those people they know abuse that platform to spread misinformation that might lead to people not taking cancer medication, not taking crucial vaccines to protect them against disease. This is life and death stuff, he reiterated. The group earlier this year named the Tennessee couple among its The Disinformation Dozen, which it said were responsible for nearly 2/3 of the anti-vaccine content online. Ahmad said yesterday, Wednesday, that the move would disrupt the couple's business, which relies heavily on free videos to generate sales leads. But he said YouTube parent Google has known for months about the Bollingers pushing misinformation and that the removal had taken far too long. Asked why YouTube allowed the Bollingers' The Truth About Cancer channel to remain up while taking down their vaccines channel, YouTube spokesperson Elena Hernandez said the company was reviewing it. Later yesterday, on Wednesday, after the AP's inquiries, the company said in a written statement that it had taken down videos from the channel that violated its COVID-19 misinformation policies. However, AP found at least one video still up on the channel that pushed anti-vaccine videos and which questioned the safety and necessity of masks and COVID-19 vaccines. The Bollingers also operate accounts on other social media platforms that remain up, including a Facebook page that has more than 1.1 million followers. That AP investigation published last week showed the Bollingers had worked with others in the anti-vaccine movement to make money by selling disinformation, an enterprise that the Bollingers have said generated millions of dollars for themselves and their affiliates. Lying pays. The truth apparently doesn't because, well, thanks to you folks out there, we're able to continue, but we're not making millions. We're not making thousands. We're not making hundreds, okay? Let's be clear. Lying pays. The truth doesn't. And the story also detailed how the Bollingers used connections from their anti-vaccine business, including Kennedy, to raise money for a super PAC. Platforms including YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter have for years allowed anti-vaccine propaganda to spread and have been slow to crack down on misinformation about COVID-19, removing just a fraction of the false content, and I should add, while making sure they suspend and remove anybody pushing against the disinformation. J. Weber of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Republican Governor Greg Abbott on Wednesday yesterday signed a law that bans abortions in Texas before many women even know they are pregnant and differs singularly from similar efforts nationwide, leaving enforcement to private citizens who can sue doctors or anyone who helps a woman get an abortion. Oh, I call that the Stasi quo. The law puts Texas in line with more than a dozen other states that ban abortions after a fetal heartbeat can be detected, possibly as early as 6 weeks. It would take effect in September, but federal courts have mostly blocked states from enforcing similar measures. But with the Supreme Court this week agreeing to take up a Mississippi law that bans abortion after 15 weeks of pregnancy, Abortion rights activists worry that a ruling favorable to the state could lay the groundwork for allowing even more restrictions, including so-called heartbeat bills. Texas' version is unique in that it prohibits state officials from enforcing the ban. Instead, it allows anyone, even someone outside of Texas, to sue an abortion provider or anyone else who may have helped someone get an abortion after the limit and seek financial damages of up to $10,000 per defendant. Well, how about suing those people? Well, you can't do that. Now, critics say that provision would allow abortion opponents to flood the courts with lawsuits to harass doctors, patients, nurses, domestic violence counselors, a friend who drove a woman to a clinic, or even a parent who paid for a procedure. Before the bill reached Abbott's desk, abortion rights groups signaled they would challenge the law. The goal is clear: to relentlessly attack our reproductive rights until abortion is a right in name only. Passing these bills is not leadership. It is cruelty and extremism, said Alexis McGill Johnson, president of the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Advanced technology can detect an electric signal flutter as early as 6 weeks into a pregnancy, even though the embryo isn't yet a fetus and does not have a heart. An embryo is termed a fetus beginning in the 11th week of pregnancy, medical experts say. Now, Texas law currently bans abortions after 20 weeks, with the exceptions for a woman with a life-threatening medical condition or if the fetus has a severe abnormality. More than 90% of abortions take place in the first 13 weeks of a woman's pregnancy, according to the CDC. And the Supreme Court will probably hear the Mississippi case in the fall, with a decision likely in spring of 2022. Willis of the American Independent brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Michonne Maddock, the co-chair of the Michigan Republican Party, suggested that her state should secede from the Union like the pro-slavery Confederacy did before the Civil War. Maybe it's time for me-exit. Americans tried it once before. Time to end our governor's tyrannical rule, Maddock wrote in a Facebook post on Friday. The post was accompanied by a picture of Maddock with Nigel Farage, the xenophobic British politician who has advocated for Brexit, the United Kingdom's departure from the EU. Maddock is now the third leader of a state Republican Party who has advocated for some form of secession, echoing comments made by the leaders of the GOP in Wyoming and Texas after the 2020 election. A Donald Trump surrogate in 2020, Maddock was elected co-chair of the state party in February. Jeff Timmer, who led the Michigan GOP from 2005 to 2009, called Maddock nuts in a February 2021 interview after calling her the most powerful person in Michigan Republican politics. Maddock's election came after she played a vocal role in efforts to overturn President Joe Biden's election win in Michigan, where Trump won in 2016. Maddock and her husband, GOP State Rep Matt Maddock, posted false messages on Facebook claiming irregularities in the state's election constitution. She appeared at a protest at the TCF Center in Detroit and promoted conspiracy theories about the election results. Is this the same guy that was at the insurrection? Huh. Her husband? I wonder. Now, Maddock in December signed a document falsely claiming to be an elector chosen by Michigan voters to cast a presidential ballot for Trump. The document, which was filed in a court case, claimed that the electors had convened in the state capitol, but that they were never actually allowed into the building. Along with her husband, she also attempted to enter the Capitol to cast an electoral vote for Trump. Oh, my. A month later, Michonne Maddock took part in the January 6th Stop the Steal rally in Washington, D.C. that preceded the attack on the U.S. Capitol. On the day of the protest, Maddock shared a video of the crowd in which a voice could be heard saying, "We need to march on the Capitol when we're done here and drag these people out of power." After the day's events, Maddock has said she condemns the attack on the building in which 5 people died. Maddock was also part of protests against COVID-19 safety regulations put in place by Governor Gretchen Whitmer. She attacked mask wearing and said she would boycott retailers who sold masks. In April, Maddock shared a tweet that falsely claimed masks are ineffective against the virus. So in other words, that Russian influence campaign is still working. Okay, let's get to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You're listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
The world may have just come to understand the nature of disease epidemics over the last year. But for more than 2 decades, David Earn has been working on his own understanding of infectious diseases, and he's using math to explain it all.
And I'm particularly interested in patterns of epidemics that have occurred in the past and see what we can understand about disease spread in the past and hope to learn about disease spread in the future from that.
Earn is an applied mathematician at Ontario's McMaster University. His research explores factors that contribute to how diseases spread among people, and he's become an expert in tracking down the historic documents about long-ago epidemics that still hold mathematical clues we can learn from today. Key to all this is his team's knack for digital sleuthing. Early on in his career, Earn recognized that he could uncover numbers of deaths and their causes in Europe by sifting through piles of old records. They're called bills of mortality, and he's found thousands of them.
If we were to look over time at all of them, they were published weekly over hundreds of years, we'd see a pattern, and that would be potentially very enlightening.
Earn started looking for one such pattern in London during the 1660s. That's when a pestilence called the Great Plague ripped through the city. Bubonic plague was the culprit. It's an infectious disease spread by rat-biting fleas. Earn knew all about that, but what he didn't know was what the pattern of transmission looked like over time.
So typical epidemics, what happens is a pathogen enters a population, somebody's infected and may infect others. And initially, when almost everybody is susceptible to the infection, you see exponential growth of cases or deaths or both. But eventually, so many people have been infected and become immune that the epidemic turns over. And, you start to see a reduction in the number of cases each day or each week or however.
If, like David Earn, you plot out the number of cases over time for an individual epidemic, you'll see an exponential rise and then a turnover and then another rise and so on.
It's kind of like a skewed bell.
And that plot can answer a lot of questions.
How quick that exponential rises at the beginning. How high does it go? How rapidly does it turn over? The structure of the epidemic, what's called the epidemic curve, which is what I'm describing.
The answers to some of these questions were sitting hidden in plain sight for centuries at London's Guildhall Library. That's where Ern and his team found hundreds of pages of yellowing parchment. The city, as it turns out, started its own health surveillance system back in the early 1600s. Now Ern and the rest of his team had access to weekly plague death counts in each of the 130 parishes that made up the city. The death counts were key to understanding the speed of spread, but the fact that they were tied to a spatial grid gave them something more. It revealed the movements of an invisible killer. Ern and colleagues found that the number of deadly infections doubled every 11 days. He was also able to tease out very strong evidence that a wave of death washed from the outskirts into the city center over a period of many months in 1665. In a year and a half, a quarter of the population of one of Europe's largest cities was dead. The human toll was shocking. But what the team still didn't know was how this compared to epidemics that played out centuries earlier.
The period of which the bills of mortality cover captures the Great Plague of London and a number of plague epidemics that occurred earlier. But we know there were earlier plague epidemics, but no chance of finding mortality records before 1538 because the deaths weren't registered.
Ern was again stumped. How could he and his colleagues find out more about the dynamics of plague and its spread prior to the 1530s? On a whim, a colleague simply did a Google search for digitized last wills and testaments and found thousands more documents. They used the dates those wills were written as a proxy for the date of death.
If you plot them up, so this is daily counts of wills, and you can see clearly all four known plague epidemics in the 14th century, and that was really exciting.
Through this new method, Ern discovered that the number of people killed by plague doubled only every 43 days during the Black Death. It was the most deadly plague epidemic in human history, and it peaked in Europe between 1347 and 1351. Even so, the disease wasn't moving through the population nearly as fast as Ern found that it was later in the 1660s.
There was such a big difference in the growth rate or the doubling time for a disease that, as far as we can tell, didn't evolve in a significant way. It spread 4 times as fast in the 17th century than in the 14th century. That's not a small difference. That's a huge change, a doubling time of around 10 days rather than several weeks.
The team isn't entirely sure exactly why the Great Plague in the 17th century spread 4 times faster than it did in the 1300s. The population in London increased from roughly 50,000 to 500,000 over those 3 centuries. They also suspect the weather might have played a role.
The wealthy were more congregated in the center later on. And the minimum of the Little Ice Age was actually in the 1600s. And so it was cooler during the Great Plague than during the invasion of the Black Death.
Colder temperatures could have meant that people spent more time indoors, in close quarters. You only have to look at the winter waves of our coronavirus epidemic to understand why that can contribute to faster spread. Regardless of the details, the work has paid other dividends. Ern and colleagues have compiled a digitized archive of all of the historic documents they were able to scrape for data, a valuable data source for others also trying to understand the ways pandemics can spread. They've also developed 2 different software tools to forecast infectious disease outbreaks and to study growth rates in real time for outbreaks like COVID-19.
And we've been using it since the start of the epidemic in order to estimate growth rates and doubling times for COVID.
The new software may have been developed with centuries-old data, but the real-time information it's producing now informs policymakers and officials on the front lines of the global pandemic we're all experiencing right now. For 60 Second Science, I'm Emily Schwing.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Die in the electric chair or be killed by a firing squad. It's your choice. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. And those really are the options, firing squad or electric chair, if you are on death row in South Carolina, according to a bill just signed into law by that state's governor, Henry McMaster. Technically, lethal injection remains the state's preferred method to kill people, but when lethal injection drugs are not available, then it will be either the electric chair or a firing squad. And lethal injection drugs have not been available in South Carolina for over a decade because pharmaceutical companies have been insisting that their drugs be used to help people, not kill them. So, South Carolina needed a plan B if it were to crank up anew its machinery of death. A number of legislators voted against the bill because they said that having recently outlawed most abortions on the basis of the sanctity of life, they could not vote to intentionally kill human beings. That argument lost. One proposed amendment would have allowed live streaming of executions so that people could see what was being done in their name. That proposal lost. Another proposal would have required lawmakers to attend the executions they have demanded and authorized to see their handiwork carried out. That amendment also lost. So, how soon this mistake-prone, racist, arbitrary system of state executions will spring back to life in South Carolina? Well, that's not clear. But, based on the new law, that day is coming. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1938. That was the day unemployed workers began a sit-down strike at the post office in Vancouver, British Columbia. They had been organized by the communist-led Relief Project Workers' Union during the Great Depression. In Canada, federally funded works projects had been administered at the provincial level. By late 1937, the Prime Minister began to cut funding. Unable to financially sustain the projects alone, Provincial Premier Thomas Patillo ended the works project for British Columbia. Masses of unemployed men thrown off their jobs, some driven to homelessness, organized occupations of the Hotel Georgia, the Vancouver Art Gallery, and the Maine Post Office to protest the cuts. While hotel owners paid protesters to leave, the occupation at the gallery and the post office lasted for weeks. Finally, on Father's Day, June 18th, gallery occupiers were driven out with tear gas. The post office strikers were met with much more violence. Royal Canadian Mounted Police led the assault with tear gas and forcibly dragging of sit-downers out of the building. Once evicted, they were met with the batons of local police. Organizers were singled out for especially severe beatings, and scores were hospitalized for their injuries. One striker, Arthur Redseth, had an eye knocked out, while his fellow sit-downer had his jaw broken for asking authorities to call an ambulance for his friend. Strike leader Steve Brody suffered permanent eye damage as well. News of the terror spread throughout the city, and by mid-afternoon, 10 to 15,000 protesters gathered to express outrage at what became known as Bloody Sunday in Vancouver. Premier Patillo denounced the strikers as having received too much sympathy. He nonetheless used the debacle as an opportunity to get federal funds reinstated. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and the Rick Smith Show.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of only around 56 to 58, with mostly cloudy early conditions with scattered thunderstorms developing later this morning into the afternoon. Winds will be out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, and some clouds overnight with lows near the low 40s. Winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10. And mostly cloudy skies early tomorrow. Will become cloudy later in the day with highs in the mid-60s. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon have spiked considerably. Now stands at 11,030. That's a increase of almost 28 to 30 people. And we stand at 141 confirmed deceased. Grass pollen is very high here in Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is good at 35 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is high, very high, at 8. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.2 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles, and relative humidity is at 90%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 57 and cloudy. Paris is 65 and cloudy. Rome is 75 and sunny. Kyiv is 63 and fair. Kabul is 68, fair with wind. Hong Kong is 82 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 68 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 56 and fair. San Francisco, California is 51 and sunny with a small craft advisory on the bay and offshore for wind. And New York, New York is a fabulous and glorious 72 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. Staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The trial of former French President Nicolas Sarkozy, who is accused of illegally financing his failed 2012 re-election campaign, resumes today after being adjourned on the opening day in March after a lawyer fell sick with COVID-19. The trial casts a further shadow over the career of a man who, as president from 2007 to 2012, bestrode the national and global stage. Earlier this year, Sarkozy was convicted of corruption in a separate case.
Je te donne, c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Rafe Kasert of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Belgian forces kept up their manhunt for an armed soldier who was on a terror watch list because of his extreme right sympathies, while the government remained nonplussed over how a known threat to society could have had access to an array of heavy weapons. The man had already threatened several people, including a top virologist, over the past few weeks before he was able to leave an army camp with guns and 4 missile launchers. The real question is, of course, how is this possible? Said Belgian Prime Minister Alexander De Croo, actually asked, adding that the 46-year-old Jurgen Konings had been on the radar of the Coordination Unit for Threat Analysis, which assesses terror threats. Meanwhile, authorities had recovered his car in northeastern Belgium. 4 missile launchers and ammunition were found in it, Belgian federal prosecutor Wenke Rogan said. Throughout the day yesterday, Wednesday, authorities kept combing through the rugged terrain from Limburg province to Konings. Authorities put out a search bulletin for the bald-shaven and tattooed Konings, who has been missing since late Monday. It warned the public not to approach him. Should they see him, it also asked Konings to turn himself in. Local media reported he had left several farewell notes. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, and don't we deserve it? So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.